5 safety mistakes that you might be making that lead to patient injury, side effects, complications, disappointments, and 1-star reviews, and all of the other things that go with it, and how to avoid them. That's what we're covering on this show. Make sure you pay attention because this is going to save you a lot of time and effort. So what happens if you don't have a focus on safety? It's not just about the complications. It's not about the vascular occlusion that we all worry about. What actually happens is your day-to-day noise rate of negative outcomes increases. So it's more bruises, it's more swelling, it's more patients anxious about things. It's more talking, trying to get out of problems. It's more reassurance. It's a lot more legwork for your front of house staff if you're employing people, having to reassure people that that bruise will eventually go away before the event that's happening. A focus on reducing all your complication rates and trying to make everything as safe as possible actually leads to an easier to run clinic. Because there's just less emotion in your day-to-day work because most people just go away with the result that they were expecting and you don't have to deal with negative consequences. So there's a lot to be gained through trying to get millimeter perfect on reducing risk in as many ways as possible. Feels like a lot of work up front, but I think it saves you a ton of time afterwards. So first, let's talk about how to avoid complications. The first mistake which people out there must be making, although I have never met one, is to believe that aspirating makes you 100% safe. Now, all the anti-aspirators in our industry always put this as one of the reasons they don't like aspirating is because of false reassurance, and that it will give injectors the idea that they don't need to worry about other safety steps. Now, if you've met someone who's like this, please let me know, because I've never met anyone like this, but I'm going to say it here, because maybe there is one out there somewhere, that if you aspirate and you get a negative, it doesn't mean that you're not in a vessel. It just means there's a lower probability that you're in a vessel at that moment. But there's a lot of other things you should be doing as well to make yourself safe. And it's these layering on of safety steps, which really is the secret to safe injecting. Number 2, the opposite of this, which is not aspirating and thinking that you're safe, because you heard some guy saying that aspirating doesn't work. This means you're using just one other thing. For example, like I'm going to continuously move my needle without anyone telling you exactly what proportion of your filler at different layers of the skin that you can inject before it's a risk, without knowing the volume of the vessels, without knowing how many different entry points or how much movement you need to, or how widely you have to dissipate your filler in order for it to be safe. But just thinking, well, I'm doing the moving, that means I'm safe. This is another surefire way to find yourself in a niche situation where you just cause a vascular occlusion because you haven't got all the parameters sorted out and you're relying on one safety measure. A while ago, I shot this funny video which uses the analogy of a seatbelt to explain one of the logical flaws that anti-aspirators use when talking about aspirating.
Dude, what the hell? I realized. Realized what? False reassurance. What do you mean false reassurance? You see, it hit me. Aspirating is dangerous because it's not 100% reliable. And then I thought, same with seatbelts. What? Do you have any idea how many people get killed wearing seatbelts every year? And you're driving around like Iron Man thinking that you're invincible just because you put your seatbelt on. That's not how it works. What are you talking about? It's basically exactly the same. We know that if you aspirate and you get a negative, that instantly makes you gung-ho about all the other safety things you can do and you just bolus away happily. It's just the same with a seatbelt. That's why you've been driving around like a maniac. And that's not me talking, that's science. That's just a story you made up about me. There's more to safety than just one step. You've been pinning your life on that seatbelt all this time, driving around thinking you're Mr. Invincible, all the while knowing that it's not 100% reliable. Dude, it doesn't have to be 100% reliable to still be a valid step. Yes, it does. Things are either 100% reliable or useless. That's science. Stop saying that's science. Your own mother wasn't 100% reliable and you didn't throw her out. It's your assertion. I think you should leave our mother out of this. That's the evidence. No, it's not. Nobody asked me if I was 100% assured by aspirating. But dude, what about the science? We know it's not a 100% reliable device. No, it's not. Nobody asked me if I was 100% reassured by wearing a seatbelt. I know it's just one step of many. This all sounds really nuanced. It either works every time or it's got no use to me, which is why I'm driving. So here's how I think you could lower your chances of having a really big accident. We're going to lower the probability of us being in any particular place at any particular time by moving around. So the trick is, you've got to keep moving. It lowers your chance of a direct hit. Check it out. Why don't you just stay neatly where there's a lower chance of hitting things? The concept is flawless. More frequent smaller accidents, but fewer really big ones. Are you really saying this is safer than just my imperfect seatbelt? Only risking a glancing blow, a mere flesh wound. Dude, this is not science. I'm putting my seatbelt on.
I did not expect this. Oh, my heart.
The reason it's relevant is because Wearing a seatbelt does not guarantee that you will not be killed in a car accident. It merely reduces the risk. There are also instances, like for example, if you fly into a lake, that wearing a seatbelt is a disadvantage. But we all accept on balance that wearing a seatbelt is better than not wearing a seatbelt. And that is the same reason why we should still aspirate despite it not being 100% effective at detecting any intravascular injection points. The next mistake I see injectors make, even world famous injectors, is relying purely on anatomy. And this looks like that guy on stage who puts a full mil into someone's forehead in one bolus because he thinks the arteries never run on the periosteum in the forehead. It's true that it's very unlikely you'll find a large vessel in the middle of the forehead, and you probably can get away with a bolus and massage in this way, but every now and then you're going to meet a patient who doesn't fit the textbook. And in fact, this happened to me when I first posted some anatomy learning online, and I got a message from a surgeon in America called Patricia Oyoli, who sent me a picture of a forehead she'd dissected, which showed basically the full periosteum covered in vessels. It really is quite a shocking image if you've been relying on there never being a vessel there. And what this means is relying on the statistical probability of where vessels should be is never enough for a lifetime's worth of practice. You always have to inject in a way that makes it safer even if there is some aberrant anatomy. And that is a really common mistake. I see the same thing being said about cheeks. You'll never find a blood vessel on the periosteum of the cheek, so you don't need to aspirate. I've got a member of my mastery program who recently sent a full syringe of blood through in a picture showing that she had aspirated on the cheek and got a huge positive aspiration, which proves that there was a vessel where there shouldn't have been one. This is common also in chins, where we are taught that injecting on the midline is fine because you'll never find a vessel there. Only recently, Julie Bass-Kaplan shared a large vascular occlusion that she'd had in clinic, not her injecting, but that involved a vascular occlusion that happened on the midline of the chin, exactly where the vessel shouldn't be according to the textbooks. It's similar in the temple, where the gunshot technique is now known to have a vessel which sometimes runs directly underneath that point, despite it being usually a very safe place to inject. So we cannot rely just on the anatomy. The next safety mistake is to rely purely on ultrasound. Now this is very tempting because it does feel like I can just have a look, see if there's nothing there, and then inject without having to worry about it. But the truth is, there are many cases now of vascular occlusions happening straight after an ultrasound. In fact, Julie Bass-Kaplan's case that she shared with the tongue vascular occlusion, that patient had been scanned prior to the injection. But small changes in position of the probe or user error can make it possible to do a scan and not see a vessel, and then to be, how unlucky can you get? But also to get a patient with aberrant anatomy. The combination of all these factors lined up to cause a rather large vascular occlusion, but thankfully Julie had all the other safety protocols in place so that that patient didn't get any necrotic wound, which is a fantastic outcome. But it just goes to show you cannot rely on any one of these safety measures. Next is diagnosing a vascular occlusion, because if you diagnose a vascular occlusion immediately, you are in a very good position to prevent necrosis, especially, of course, if you've used a reversible product, a hyaluronic acid, as opposed to one of these non-reversible products. Now, this is absolutely key to get the diagnosis right to start with. When I had my first vascular occlusion many years ago, I remember noting the capillary refill initially looked normal as I gently pushed on the lip. As I increased the pressure because I could sense something wasn't right, I kept pushing harder and for longer. It became really obvious that there was a compromise to that vessel. Not long ago, Dr. Subio posted a fantastic clip where he demonstrated a normal capillary refill. Then, as his camera panned out, it was revealed that this normal capillary refill was actually on a chunk of skin that had already been removed from the patient, demonstrating unambiguously that it's not cardiac output that is refilling the skin in this situation, and that the capillary refill that you're seeing in some cases, if you're only pressing gently, is probably just a little bit of blood in the venous system that swashes in and out superficially and looks like blood flow. So you must do a decent capillary refill. My capillary refill tests these days involve often the full palm of my hand pushing on the patient for 5 to 10 seconds and then releasing, because I find it so useful seeing which direction the blood flow comes from, and also always including a control. So if I'm going to compress one side of the lip, I'll also compress the other side of the lip. And if I'm worried about a cheek, I'll do both cheeks. So it's a good, long, firm press under good bright light, and then releasing and seeing where the blood flow is last to return to. Extremely helpful test. I think it's underrated despite the fact that it's used by nearly everyone, but you must do it properly. So if you're interested in learning a lot more about the anatomy and how to become a safe and effective injector, make sure you sign up to the waiting list for my new membership. The link is in the description.